Bloodline by Sidney Sheldon. Dedication for Natalie with love. Epigraph. The physician will carefully prepare a mixture of crocodile dung, lizard flesh, bat's blood, and camel spit from a papyrus listing 811 prescriptions used by the Egyptians in 1550 BC. Book 1, Chapter 1. Istanbul, Saturday, September 5th, 10 p.m. He was seated in the dark alone behind the desk of Hajib Kafir, staring unseeingly out of the dusty office window at the timeless minarets of Istanbul. He was a man who was at home in a dozen capitals of the world, but Istanbul was one of his favorite cities. Not the tourist Istanbul of Beyoğlu Street or the gaudy Lalazar bar of the Hilton, but the out-of-the-way places that only the Muslims knew. The Yalis and the small markets beyond the souks and the Teli Baba. The cemetery where one person was buried and the people came to pray to him. His waiting had the patience of a hunter, the quiet stillness of a man in control of his body and his emotion. He was Welsh, with the dark, stormy good looks of his ancestors. He had black hair and a strong face, and quick, intelligent eyes that were a deep blue. He was over 6 feet tall, with the lean, muscular body of a man who kept himself in good physical condition. The office was filled with the odors of Hajib Kafir, his sickly sweet tobacco, his acrid Turkish coffee, his fat, oily body. Rhys Williams was unaware of them. He was thinking about the telephone call he had received from Chamonix an hour earlier. "A terrible accident. Believe me, Mr. Williams, we are all devastated. It happened so quickly that there was no chance to save him. Mr. Roth was killed instantly." Sam Roth, president of Roth & Sons, the second largest pharmaceutical company in the world, a multi-billion-dollar dynasty that gridded the globe. It was impossible to think of Sam Roth as being dead. He had always been so vital, so full of life and energy, a man on the move, living in the airplanes that raced him to company factories and offices all over the world, where he solved problems others could not deal with, created new concepts, pushed everyone to do more, better. Even though he had married and fathered a child, his only real interest had been the business. Sam Roth had been a brilliant and extraordinary man. Who could replace him? Who was capable of running the enormous empire he had left? Sam Roth had not chosen an heir apparent. But then, he had not planned to die at 52. He had thought there would be plenty of time, and now his time had run out. Lights in the office suddenly flashed, and Rhys Williams looked toward the doorway, momentarily blinded. "Mr. Williams, I did not know anyone was here." It was Sophie, one of the company's secretaries, who was assigned to Rhys Williams whenever he was in Istanbul. She was Turkish, in the middle 20s, with an attractive face and a lithe, sensuous body, rich with promise. She had let Rhys know in subtle, ancient ways that she was available to bring him whatever pleasures he wished, whenever he desired. But Rhys was not interested. "Now," she said, "I returned to finish some letters for Mr. Coffey," she added softly. "Perhaps there is something I can do for you." As she moved closer to the desk, Rhys could sense the musky smell of a wild animal in season. "Where is Mr. Kafir?" Sophie shook her head regretfully. "He has left for the day." She soothed the front of her dress and the palms of soft, clever hands. "Can I help you in some way?" Her eyes were dark and moist. "Yes," Rhys said. "Find him." She frowned. "I have no idea where he could try the Caravanserai or the Marmara. It would probably be the former, where one of Hajib Kafir's mistresses worked as a belly dancer. Although you never know with Kafir," Rhys thought. "He might even be with his wife." Sophie was apologetic. "I will try, but I'm afraid I explained to him that if he's not here in an hour, he no longer has a job." The expression on her face changed. "I will see what I can do, Mr. Williams." She started toward the door. Turn out the lights. Somehow it was easier to sit in the dark with his thoughts. The image of Sam Roth kept intruding. Mont Blanc should have been an easy climb this time of year, early September. Sam had tried the climb before, but storms had kept him from reaching the peak. "I'll plant the company flag up there," he had promised Rhys, jokingly. And then the telephone call a short while ago, as Rhys was checking out the Para Palace. He could hear the agitated voice on the telephone. They were doing a traverse over the glacier. Mr. Roth lost his footing and his rope broke. He fell into the bottomless crevasse. Reese could visualize Sam's body smashing against the unforgiving ice, hurtling downward into the crevasse. He forced his mind away from the scene. That was the past. There was the present to worry about now. The member of Sam Roth's family had to be notified of his death, and they were scattered in various parts of the world. A press announcement had been prepared. The news was going to travel through international financial circles like a shock wave. With the company in the midst of a financial crisis, it was vital that the impact of Sam Roth's death be minimized as much as possible. That would be Reese's job. Reese Williams had first met Sam Roth 9 years earlier. Reese, then 25, had been sales manager of a small drug firm. He was brilliant and innovative, and as the company had expanded, Reese's reputation had quickly spread. He was offered a job at Roth & Sons, and when he turned it down, Sam Roth bought the company Reese worked for and sent for him. Even now, he could recall the overwhelming power of Sam Roth's presence at his first meeting. "You belong here at Roth & Sons," Sam Roth had informed him. "That's why I bought out that horse and buggy outfit you were with." Reese had found himself flattered and irritated at the same time. "Suppose I don't want to stay," Sam Roth had smiled and said confidently. "You'll want to stay. You and I have something in common, Reese. We're both ambitious. We want to own the world. I'm going to show you how." The words were magic, a promised feast for the fierce hunger that burned in the young man. For he knew something that Sam Roth did not. There was no Reese Williams. He was a myth that had been created out of desperation and poverty and despair. He had been born near the coalfields of Gwent and Carmarthen, the red-scarred valleys of Wales, where layers of sandstone and saucer-shaped beds of limestone and cold puckered the green earth. He grew up in the fabled land where the very names were poetry. Brecon and Pennyfan and Penderyn and Glencorg and Maeskeg. It was a land of legend where the coal buried deep in the ground had been created 280 million years before, where the landscape was once covered with so many trees that a squirrel could travel from Brecon beacons to the sea without ever touching the ground. But the Industrial Revolution had come along, and the beautiful green trees were chopped down by the charcoal burners to feed the insatiable fires of the iron industry. The young boy grew up with the heroes of another time in another world. Robert Ferrer, burned at the stake by the Roman Catholic Church because he would not take a vow of celibacy and abandon his wife. King Hywel the Good, who brought the law to Wales in the 10th century. The fierce warrior Brychan, who sired 12 sons and 24 daughters and savagely put down all attacks on his kingdom. It was a land of glorious histories in which the lad had been raised. But it was not all glory. Reese's ancestors were miners, every one of them, and the young boy used to listen to the tales of hell that his father and his uncles recounted. They talked of terrible times when there was no work, when the rich coalfields of Gwent and Carmarthen had been closed in a bitter fight between the companies and the miners were debased by a poverty that eroded ambition and pride, that sapped a man's spirit and strength and finally made him surrender. When the mines were open, it was another kind of hell. Most of Reese's family had died in the mines. Some had perished in the bowels of the earth. Others had coughed their blackened lungs away. Few had lives past the age of 30. Reese used to listen to his father and his aging uncles discussing the past, the cave-ins and the cripplings and the strikes, talking of the good times and the bad. And to the young boy they seemed the same, all bad. The thought of spending his years in the darkness of the earth appalled Reese. He knew he had to escape. He ran away from his home when he was 12. He left the valleys of coal and went to the coast, to Sully Ranny Bay in Lavernock, where the rich tourists flocked, and the young boy fetched and carried and made himself useful, helping ladies down the steep cliffs to the beach, lugging heavy picnic baskets, driving a pony cart at Penarth, and working at the amusement park at Whitmore Bay. He was only a few hours away from home, but the distance could not be measured. The people here were from another world. Reese Williams had never imagined such beautiful people or such glorious finery. Each woman looked like a queen to him, and the men were all elegant and splendid. This was the world where he belonged, and there was nothing he would not do to make it his. By the time Reese Williams was 14, he had saved enough money to pay for his passage to London. He spent the first 3 days simply walking around the huge city, staring at everything, hungrily drinking in the incredible sights and the sounds and the smells. His first job was as delivery boy at the draper's shop. There were 2 male clerks, superior beings both, and a female clerk who made the young Welsh boy heart sing every time he looked at her. The men treated Rhys as he was meant to be treated, like dirt. He was a curiosity. He dressed peculiarly, had abominable manners, and spoke with an incomprehensible accent. They could not even pronounce his name. They called him Rice and Rye and Rise. It's pronounced Rhys, Rhys kept telling them. The girl took pity on him. Her name was Gladys Simpkins, and she shared a tiny flat in Tooting with 3 other girls. One day, she allowed the young boy to walk her home after work and invited him in for a cup of tea. Young Rhys was overcome with nervousness. He had thought that this was going to be his first sexual experience. But when he began to put his arm around Gladys, she stared at him a moment, then laughed. "I'm not going to give you none of that," she said. "But I'll give you some advice. If you want to make something of yourself, get yourself some proper clothes and a bit of education and learn yourself some manners. You're going to be a bit of all right when you grow up. If you want to make something of yourself." That was the moment when the fictitious Rhys Williams was born. The real Rhys Williams was an uneducated, ignorant boy with no background, no breeding, no past, no future. But he had imagination, intelligence, and a fiery ambition. It was enough. He started with the image of what he wanted to be, who he intended to be. When he looked in his mirror, he did not see the clumsy, grubby little boy with a funny accent. His mirror image was polished and suave and successful. Little by little, Rhys began to match himself to the image in his mind. He attended night school, and he spent his weekends in art galleries. He haunted public libraries and went to the theater, sitting in the gallery, studying the fine clothes of the men seated in the stalls. He scrimped on food so that once a month he could go to the good restaurant, where he carefully copied the table manners of others. He observed and learned and remembered. He was like a sponge, erasing the past, soaking up the future. In one short year, Rhys had learned enough to realize that Gladys Simpkins, his princess, was a cheap Cockney girl who was already beneath his taste. He quit the draper's shop and went to work as a clerk at a chemist's shop that was part of a large chain. He was almost 16 now, but he looked older. He had filled out and was taller. Women were beginning to pay attention to his dark Welsh good looks and his quick, flattering tongue. He was an instant success in the shop. Female customers would wait until Rhys was available to take care of them. He dressed well and spoke correctly, and he knew he had come a long way from the Gwent and Carmarthen. But when he looked in the mirror, he was still not satisfied. The journey he intended to make was still ahead of him. Within 2 years, Rhys Williams was made manager of the shop where he worked. The district manager of the chain said to Rhys, "This is just the beginning, Williams. Work hard and one day you'll be the superintendent of half a dozen stores." Rhys almost laughed out loud. To think that he could be the height of anyone's ambition. Rhys had never stopped going to school. He was studying business administration and marketing and commercial law. He wanted more. His image in the mirror was at the top of the ladder. Rhys felt he was still at the bottom. His opportunity to move up came when a drug salesman walked in one day, watched Rhys charm several ladies into buying products they had no use for, and said, "You're wasting your time here, lad. You should be working in a bigger pond." "What do you have in mind?" Rhys asked. "Let me talk to my boss about you." 2 weeks later, Rhys was working as a salesman at a small drug firm. He was one of 50 salesmen, but when Rhys looked in his special mirror, he knew that that was not true. His only competition was himself. He was getting closer to his image now. Closer to the fictitious character he was creating, a man who was intelligent, cultured, sophisticated, and charming. What he was trying to do was impossible. Everyone knew that one had to be born with those qualities. They could not be created, but Rhys did it. He became the image he had envisioned. He traveled around the country, selling the firm's products, talking and listening. He would return to London full of practical suggestions, and he quickly began to move up the ladder. 3 years later, he had joined the company. Rhys was made general sales manager. Under his skillful guidance, and company began to expand. And 4 years later, Sam Roth had come into his life. He had recognized the hunger in Rhys. "You are like me," Sam Roth had said. "We want to own the world. I'm going to show you how." And he had. Sam Roth had been a brilliant mentor. Over the next 9 years under Sam Roth's tutelage, Rhys Williams had become invaluable to the company. As time went on, he was given more and more responsibility, reorganizing various divisions, troubleshooting in whatever part of the world he was needed, coordinating the different branches of Roth & Sons, creating new concepts. In the end, Rhys knew more about running the company than anyone else, except Sam Roth himself. Rhys Williams was the logical successor to the presidency. One morning when Rhys and Sam Roth were returning from Caracas in the company jet, a luxury converted Boeing 707-320, one of the fleet of 8 planes, Sam Roth had complimented Rhys on a lucrative deal that he had concluded with the Venezuelan government. "There'll be a fat bonus in it for you, Rhys." Rhys had replied quietly, "I don't want a bonus, Sam. I'd prefer some stock and a place on your board of directors." He had earned it, and both men were aware of it. But Sam had said, "I'm sorry, I can't change the rules, even for you. Roth & Sons is a privately held company. No one outside the family can sit on the board or hold stock." Rhys had known that, of course. He attended all board meetings, but not as a member. He was an outsider. Sam Roth was the last male in the Roth bloodline. The other Roths, Sam's cousins, were females. The men they had married sat on the board of the company. Walter Gassner, who had married Anna Roth. Eva Palazzi, married to Simonetta Roth. Charles Mardell, married to Helen Roth. And Sir Alec Nichols, whose mother had been a Roth. So Rhys had been forced to make a decision. He knew that he deserved to be on the board, that one day he should be running the company. Present circumstances prevented it, but circumstances had a way of changing. Rhys had decided to stay, to wait and see what happened. Sam had taught him patience, and now Sam was dead. The office lights blazed on again, and Kafid stood in the doorway. Kafid was the Turkish salesman for Roth & Sons. He was a short, swarthy man who wore diamonds, and his fat belly like proud ornaments. He had the disheveled air of a man who had dressed hastily. So Sophie had not found him in the nightclub. Ah well, Rhys thought. A side effect of Sam Roth's death, coitus interruptus. "Rhys," Kafid was exclaiming, "my dear fellow, forgive me. I had no idea you were still in Istanbul. You were on your way to catch a plane, and I had some urgent business to. Sit down, Hajib. Listen carefully. I want you to send 4 cables in the company code. They're going to different countries. I want them hand-delivered by our own messengers. Do you understand?" "Of course," Kafir said, bewildered. "Perfectly." Rhys glanced at him, gold, bomb, and Mercier watch on his wrists. "The new city post office will be closed. Send the cables from Yeni Postain Cat. I want them on their way within 30 minutes. He handed Kafir a copy of the cable he had written out. "Anyone who discusses this will be instantly discharged." Kafir glanced at the cable and his eyes widened. "My God," he said. "Oh my God." He looked at Rhys's dark face. How did this terrible thing happen?" "Sam Roth died in an accident," Rhys said. Now, for the first time, Rhys allowed his thoughts to go to what he had been pushing away from his consciousness, what he had been trying to avoid thinking about. Elizabeth Roth, Sam's daughter. She was 24 now. When Rhys had first met her, she had been a 15-year-old girl with braces on her teeth, fiercely shy and overweight, a lonely rebel. Over the years, Rhys had watched Elizabeth develop into a very special woman, with her mother's beauty and her father's intelligence and spirit. She had become close to Sam. Rhys knew how deeply the news would affect her. He would have to tell her himself. 2 hours later, Rhys was over the Mediterranean on a company jet headed for New York.